So I started my sales adventure, I would say, in a company which made engineering products. And I was selling valves. I had a very unique incident, I think, which was that I was I was posted in Bangalore. I was going through some old files, and there was an order from HAL for some of the fighter aircraft for some valves for cryogenic purposes. And for whatever reason, I actually thought that calculation was wrong, and they had ordered the wrong valves. The advantage of being young and fearless is that we call up and straight away tell the chief engineer of HAL, hey, you're wrong, you made a mistake. And there was a stunned silence on the other side. And he said, okay, so who are you? And I told him, look, I've just newly joined. He said, oh, really? Okay. And I remember when I first came to the US, I had no connects. It was my first visit to the US. And I just said, who are going to be the likely buyers? It's going to be all the big companies, the big corporations. So I opened up a Fortune and Forbes 500 list, the top 500 companies, and I started calling them from their switchboards. And it was quite fascinating. I used to hit some CIOs, and most people didn't even know where India was on the map of the world in those days. And in those days, I remember my first line always used to be, where is India on the map? What is the political system in India? What is the climate in India? What's the education system in India? It was an all India sale. It had nothing to do with Infosys, software, nothing. And I didn't actually write software. But my philosophy was, I'm not actually trying to sell a project, I'm trying to sell a relationship.
I think we'll get started actually. So first of all, Phaneesh, it's a great privilege for me to actually invite you and talk to you. Personally, I entered the IT in the late 90s, so I'm a newbie as such compared to what you have done. So I've been part of a lot of pantry conversations where people often talk about you. I was in Chennai for the most part in India, but nevertheless your name kind of recounts everywhere when sales conversations crop up. And I know that people talk about a lot of things, and sometimes I wonder it's actually a rumor or it's true. For example, like people say, Phaneesh wants a sales team to learn golf first before they learn sales, and they would say, Phaneesh prefers more talking rather than doing wine and dine and things like that. So sometimes I wonder, if this is actually true, because a lot of times I hear CEOs saying that, wine and dine is what brings a sale and things like that. And to the contrary, when you hear people saying that no, Phaneesh doesn't do that kind of a sale, but he still manages to win the customer's confidence or the prospect's confidence and things like that. So a lot of things. So for me, it's a fanboy moment actually talking to you. So I'm very, very thrilled, and I'm very, very privileged to be talking to you. And I remember you did this show in 2019 with Nitin Bajaj, where you said, when he asked what motivates you, you did mention that, talking to people, inspiring them and helping them, and all that motivates you a lot. I believe that's the same reason for which you agreed to do this session, because we have, a mixed group here, basically, budding entrepreneurs, technologists, upcoming salespeople, and others actually who wanted to hear you out and wanted to know about what it means to make a sale in today's age, and what has changed fundamentally in terms of the old timers in sales versus what it is today, what has changed with respect to prospects' expectations and things like that. So welcome to Soorarai Pootru, or Praise the Warriors. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. My pleasure completely, Vasu. It's a pleasure to be here. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm trying to keep the session today in terms of more of a mixed thing. So where I want to ask you questions about your journey in sales, and also about your entrepreneurial journey being the CEO of Patni iGATE, and also about the early days of you selling in IT services with no inspiration per se, because you are one of the early pioneers to do this actually. And usually people prefer to walk the path that people have walked before and things like that. So I know that I'm talking to somebody who has invented the sales approach itself for services organization, as opposed to innovating actually. So I'm very, very thrilled. So let me start off by asking this to you. I know that you came from a family where your father was an engineering person working in the mechanical engineering field, if I'm not wrong, and your mother being a homemaker. And you went to the IITs apparently, so which means that at that point of time, at least you would have thought that technology is your forte. So how did the entry to sales happen?
I think it was quite interesting because what happened was that even when I was doing my IIT, in my mind I always wanted to be out rather than inside a factory or inside a shop floor or whatever. So I started my sales adventure, I would say, in a company which made engineering products. So this was a small company, not a small, a very large British company called McNeil and Mager. And I was selling valves. And it was quite a fascinating story because you had to do a lot of technical calculations to figure out what kind of valves you had to do. So that was what the engineering, where it came in. And you had to be able to convince the customer that that was the right valve, and B, to buy it from you. I must confess that, in those days, I had a very unique incident, I think, which was that I was posted in Bangalore. I was going through some old files, and there was an order from HAL for some of the fighter aircraft for some valves for cryogenic purposes, because you're going to be using it at 40,000 feet level. And for whatever reason, I actually thought that calculation was wrong, and they had ordered the wrong valves.
Okay.
So, the advantage of being young and fearless is that we call up and straight away tell the chief engineer of HAL, hey, you're wrong, you made a mistake. And there was a stunned silence on the other side. And he said, okay, so who are you? And I told him, look, I've just newly joined. He said, oh, really? I mean, you could see the almost derision in his voice. And then I said, yes. And he said, so where did you join from? I said, I joined from IIT Madras. So I think his attitude immediately changed. He said, can you come and meet me right away? So I said, okay. So I went and met him, and I proved to him that the calculations were all wrong. And I think, long story short, I think his respect for me grew a lot because he realized that I was really focused more on making sure they had the right product rather than achieving the sale which had already been placed.
Okay.
Which was a lot different from, at that point of time, my boss. And and then my boss's boss was actually a graduate from IIM Cal. So it actually convinced me that maybe I should really be doing something in IIM and really focus my tools and all that. So that's how I ended up in IIM Ahmedabad a few months later.
Okay.
So that was actually the kind of a move to
the
sales.
Starting point.
And in IIM, actually what happened was that we used to always have this marketing fair. Every year there was a marketing fair, where you call in a number of companies and you do projects and so on and so forth for specific companies. And you'll get sponsorships. And, in those days, each sponsor was supposed to be some $10,000 or whatever it is. And, we were trying to raise 1 lakh, 10 sponsors or multiple sponsors. And I thought that, my philosophy was always it's easier to do a few big deals than, hundreds of small deals kind of stuff.
Right.
So I went and spoke to 5 companies in Bangalore, and all 5 were happy to put in $10,000 each. So half of that money was raised within 4 or 5 days itself. And that was also something that convinced me that, as long as you're trying to be transparent and as long as you try and make sure that people understand exactly what they're getting into, they're happy enough to buy, in a sense. And that kind of reinforced, and that's how I started off, and I always stayed on the sales or marketing side ever since from there when I joined Sonata. So it was quite an interesting story.
Okay. So when, after all this manufacturing recommendations, reviews and everything, feedback and all that, you eventually identified yourself being a salesperson and, with the target, not a target basically, but with the ability to sell something without even having a target, gave you the conviction that you can do this. So when you joined Infosys, we have heard the story of how you came into it. I think you saw an ad where they said they were looking for marketing people and all that, and you mentioned about they really needed some marketing help amidst all that ad that they had given and everything. So when you chose to go to California, and you had also mentioned about why you chose and everything, but How was it actually initially? Because getting a big deal obviously would have been a challenge. So what was the mindset like? I'm sure they would have, I mean, Infosys would have also given you a target in terms of what they wanted and everything. So how easy or how difficult was it in terms of getting your first sale, or, during the initial days?
I think it was very different in those days. So first of all, just you're talking about Infosys targets. Well, actually, Infosys had gone in 10 years from $0 to $1 million. Right. 81 to 91, they'd gone to $1 million. So it wasn't really much that you can set as a target, because you don't have my philosophy is a target is like throwing a dart unless you have a repeatable process and a repeatable model. Then only you can actually predict a target, or then only you can fix a target, and so on and so forth. Anyway, the goal was to go out, hopefully do a lot, and see what will happen. Okay. And I remember when I first came to the US, I had no connects. It was my first visit to the US, and I just said, who are going to be the likely buyers? It's going to be all the big companies, the big corporations. So I opened up a Fortune and Forbes 500 list, the top 500 companies, and I started calling them from their switchboards and said, hey, this is what I want to do. And it was quite fascinating. I used to hit some CIOs, and most people didn't even know where India was on the map of the world in those days. It's fascinating, because today, the same IT executive who didn't know where India was on the map can today tell you how long it will take to get to your facility from the Leela in Bangalore. Because, that's the way, the maturity and knowledge has just shifted so much. And in those days, I remember my first slide always used to be, where is India on the map? What is the political system in India? What is the climate in India? What's the education system in India? It was an all India sale. It had nothing to do with Infosys, software, nothing.
Wow.
We can do this from India. Okay? There were hardly any Indians in the tech world in those days, like today, it's flooded with Indians and so on and so forth. So it was really a concept sale that you had to do. And I think, the difference in approach, I remember in some sense, the TCS and Wipro models, they were the only two companies which were trying to do something. So they had project managers who were trying to sell. And the project managers who were trying to do some sales were, the advantage I think that Wipro and TCS always felt was that these guys can estimate the project size right in front of the customer and all of that stuff. I didn't actually write software, so I don't. But my philosophy was, I'm not actually trying to sell a project, I'm trying to sell a relationship. And a relationship to me means it'll be a series of projects, it'll be long term. And it's a great matter of pride to me that a lot of the accounts that I opened in 92, 93, 94, 95 are still extremely large accounts 25 years later, 26 years later for Infosys. Apple is a $400+ million account for Infosys today. Nordstrom, which I opened in 93, is still a $150 million plus account, I think, for Infosys. Southern California Edison. I can go through a list of the number of accounts they opened, because the whole philosophy was, we were not selling a project, we were not selling technical capability. We were just selling the capability that, hey, you need a long-term partner, and we are your long-term partner. So we were selling relationships. It was more about concepts. It was more about those kinds of things rather than any technology or any technical project. Today, of course, that's gone. I mean, it's very difficult to do that. I mean, today you have to do that. That's table stakes, that you have to prove that you're a good long-term partner, but you also have to bring a lot more capability to the table and so on. In those days, my philosophy was simple. If I could sell India, because they bought the story of India from me, they would automatically buy from me.
Wow.
So it was really a sale of the country in those days and not anything else. And client confidence is always all about how do you come across? Can you deliver on your commitments? Can you do exactly what you committed that you're going to do, and can you follow through? And I remember one particular incident for which Nordstrom really cited as an example of outstanding customer service was, I had promised to deliver changes to a contract to them on a particular day, right? And and I had to take an urgent flight on that day.
Okay.
And in those days, there was no connectivity, there was no Wi-Fi on the plane, and all of those kinds of things. So actually, what I did was I hand wrote all the changes, and as soon as I reached the other side, I faxed it to them.
Wow.
Okay, so I actually hand wrote, and they were amazed by two things. That first, somebody's actually handwriting all of this stuff, and secondly, that the handwriting was so good. Coming from India, you have a good cursive writing, right?
Right.
And they were quite fascinated, and it was very, and I think if you show that you are able to deliver on your commitments, they will generally believe that the rest of the organization is as conscious as you are. And I think that's a very important thing. If you say you're going to do something by a certain date, you have to do it. That's the hallmark of excellence, and those are all basic table stakes. Don't make commitments that you cannot keep. And these are the kinds of client confidence, quote unquote, winning stories, I would say, that in many things. If I look back on each of these cases, it has been that I promised something, and it's simple. You promise something, customer says, will we get it by this? You say yes, and then you do it. Okay. And then you follow through that on the project teams and so on, and then automatically the reputation builds, and you're set to go.
Excellent. So after the 93, 94, 95, when it came to, let's say, 2000, I think a lot of companies were coming into it. So did you make a change to the sales pitch about the country and all that, or you still retain the same while adding more flavor on the technology side?
No, I think, it was very interesting. In 94, 95, we set out to build a brand for Infosys. And, the positioning, that time I was heading sales and marketing for Infosys. So the positioning that I had taken at that point of time was this lotus in the marsh position. Because in those days, it was mainly business houses who had questionable accounting practices, who used to run companies listed on the exchange. And, over time, everybody has cleaned up their practices. Over time, everybody has, become more transparent and all of that stuff. But in those days, so we positioned ourselves as the lotus in the clean, ethical, professional run, professional owned kind of a company, with Mr. Murthy as the spokesman for the company, just like Bill Gates used to be the Mr. Right. Microsoft, Larry Ellison used to be Mr. Oracle, Mr. Murthy was Mr. Infosys, it was. And his personal values of humility, cleanliness, transparency, honesty, integrity were all reflected effectively in the Infosys brand. So this is what the brand of Infosys was, and we grew on that brand for a long time. So if you look at all of the 90s literature, it was all around this. Then what happened was subsequently in 99, I think, after we had listed on NASDAQ, I was speaking at one particular forum in TIE, the Indus Entrepreneur, right. The annual forum here in Santa Clara. And after the talk, what happened was that some few people, couple of government officials and all of that came to me and said, fantastic company, fantastic story, congratulations, you guys are fantastic. Then he asked me, he said, what exactly do you do? And I'm kind of shocked. This is a company which was a household name at that time in India, and people didn't know what we were doing. They just knew it was a great script, it was a great company, great values, honest, great, etc., great results, but right. They didn't know what exactly we did. So that's when I think even the sales story and the marketing story we changed to talk about the business transformation, technology-led business transformation.
Okay.
So the story changed, so no longer it was the India clean, etc. story. And we morphed that story to how we do business transformation using technology. So still not any technical skills, but the concept of how we can change your business by applying technology layers more and more to that business. That's how the story changed in the 90s. And by the time it had become, like you said, more competitive. So we had to take the higher position anyway, because you don't want to be commoditized ever, because by that time we were also roughly at about 30% plus net income post-tax, so it was quite rare, a highly profitable company, and we didn't want to lose that profitability by being in the commodity marketplace.
Right. And how did you have a vision for your sales team to do this? Because that's the biggest challenge today, right? I mean, a lot of times, looking at a company like Infosys or Wipro for that matter, the sales team has to coherently work, and they all have to buy into the vision that, as the head of sales, that you set actually. So how did you do that actually with the Infosys sales team? Because I know you handpick people, you are the first to go in there, and then you pick people. How did the training and everything happen, Phaneesh? How did you manage to do it? Because it is not easy to tell a 20-year-old story in 2 minutes' time, but I'm just trying to understand that.
No, I think it's interesting. What happens is that I graduated from IIT and IIM. So because you've been relatively successful, what do? You try and go back and say, let me see who are the other IIT IIM people I can steal. And I went back to IIM Ahmedabad and hired some people, or rather, hired some people who had graduated from IIT from IIM Ahmedabad a few years back, or whatever it is. And to me, this was a lesson which was taught to me by a very profound gentleman called Doc Sahu, who was the head of HR in Indian Organic Chemicals, which was, Sonata, my first job after IIM was, part of Indian Organic Chemicals. And Doc Sahu always used to say, केवल देखना है कि दम है कि नहीं. दम है तो कुछ भी कर सकता है. He always said, if you have that strength, if you have that tiger spirit, then you can be taught anything, you can be trained in anything, etc., etc. But that tiger spirit is difficult to actually train in somebody. So, the choice became very simple. It didn't matter to me whether somebody was doing work in tea or selling soaps and shampoos or banking services or computers or whatever it is. As long as he was a tiger or she was a tigress, that's all I cared about. And everybody was nervous. I can tell you that everybody was nervous. We don't know anything about software. We don't know anything about software. And so technical fields, people get a little scared about, in those days. And I told them, look, guys, we are not here to sell software. We are here to sell relationships. And that's the fundamental shift. And therefore, when we were training, we never trained anybody on how to write COBOL or in those days, or how to write C++ or C or whatever it is in those days. Nothing. We never did any of that stuff. We just took them through what is the life cycle of a project, right? What's the process? Right. What's the life cycle of a project? How you do requirements? What happens in design? What happens in coding? What happens in testing?
Right.
And we showed them how, because this is done here, it has to be done near the user. This can be done away from the user, and therefore we evolved this on-site, offshore concept and all of that stuff. So I think that they're tigers. They understood it. They said, okay, fair. You're coming from IIT, IIM kind of a profile. You're among the brightest in the country anyway, automatically. Right? So effectively what happened was, it worked fine. It worked great. And that's the basically thing, because the question is, you should be clear what you're trying to sell. If you're clear about what you're trying to sell, we were not trying to sell software project. We were trying to sell relationships.
Excellent.
And that was the big difference, I think, compared to any of the other companies. And because we were selling relationships, I could do with a team like this. In fact, I must tell you, there's a friend of mine who used to be in the private equity world, who owned an IT services company. And one day he called me and said, yeah, Phaneesh, can you come and help us a little? I said, what happened? He said, we have hired these 20 MBAs. They don't know what to do. We also don't know what to do with it. I said, so why did we hire them? He said, no, you were hiring so many MBAs and it was all working out so well. Then, why? We also thought we'll. I said, yeah, but you should just be clear about what you're hiring for. And as long as you're clear about what you're hiring for, I think that's the key.
Okay. And even for a 1,000-member sales team or a 2,000-member sales team, it still holds good, is it? Because it's not easy to get IMs and IITs all the time. So somewhere you would make some compromises. So how would that institutionalizing part happen?
I think yes, I think you're right. So once you start scaling, then the model is debugged. In what you see, so if you think about how I used to approach my sale, I would go and talk about, let's say, 5 concepts to the customer. Okay, 2 or 3 would make his eyes light up. Okay, Oh, okay, you're doing stock options to all people. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, we like that concept. Okay, we like the feeling. Okay, and you're able to do this. Okay, you're hiring based on how quickly people can learn. Okay, we like that concept. And then some 2, 3 other concepts won't fly. I mean, because remember, we're talking about relationships. We're not talking about
Right.
software. We're not talking about it, right? So we're talking about abstract concepts on what it takes to do organizational building. We're talking about how organizations are built and so on and so forth. So it's a very different thing. And he likes those two. So then the next story, what you do is that you emphasize those two, and then you add 2 or 3 more concepts, which remove 2 or 3 concepts and add 2 or 3 other concepts, which people, the 2 or 3 concepts you remove, which people didn't really care for or didn't like, and then you add 2 or 3 more new concepts, and slowly you're evolving what I call the secret sauce. Right? So this is, to me, the biggest thing that happens. How do you evolve the secret sauce for any organization? What makes that organization tick? And the moment you evolve that secret sauce, then you can start scaling it out to a number of people. And now I won't say it doesn't matter, but it almost doesn't matter who all you're hiring now. Because the messages have been packaged. So, it's like if you go to Disneyland, right? Everybody is trained to speak the same message in the same way, with the same intonations, with the same jokes, and so on and so forth. Because the message has been very well packaged, and you get the same experience of Disneyland regardless of whether you were with John or Mary or with Joe in your boat on a safari or whatever. You understand what I'm saying? That the concept is so that I'm not saying that IT sales is as cookie cutter. It's not. It's definitely not. And there's a lot of individual flair and there's a lot of the other stuff. But at the end of the day, I think the key thing is that can you get at least your messaging right? And can you make sure that people have followed that messaging? And so therefore now you can. And a lot of the training is a lot of the training and mentoring that we used to do. And we used to invest a lot in training. I remember somebody always used to ask me, we spend a lot of money and time on training. And you personally spend a lot of time on mentoring and training people and hand-holding them and stuff like that. What happens if they go and leave? And my question was always, what happens if we don't train them and they actually decide to stay? That's even worse. Right? So, so that's the problem. And so we used to basically spend a lot of time, and all of the training was really focused on continuing to deliver that message in a neat, polished manner.
Okay.
Continue to stay up the value chain, don't go down. Continue to sell value, not cost. Continue to sell relationships, not projects. Continue to sell journeys and not individual points of time, certain things, and so on and so forth. Okay. So I think that was what the training and mentoring was all about. Okay.
So coming to the rumor part that I mentioned in the first part of this conversation, really, do you want, do you expected your sales team to learn golf?
No, I think, there are certain, if you look at the executives, because of the sales team that we were hiring in many ways, there are multiple ways to build relationships with your clients. If you hire people more locally here, obviously they might have gone to the same school, kids might be going to the same school, you might be going to the same church, and so on and so forth. So you have a network because you went through the schooling system, the college system in the US, and you build your own network if you grew up in the US. Now, if you grew up in India and actually went to school in India, obviously that US network is not available to you.
Right.
And therefore, the question is, how do you build your relationships with your clients? And one way to build your relationship with your client is that the power of your ideas. So, the advantage is, can you do enough preparation, enough research, enough thinking that your client actually wants to meet you because he or she knows that they'll benefit from that meeting. So it's not that you will benefit, but they also feel that they will benefit because that they will learn something new, that they will that it is a value add in their job, in their profession, that the ideas that you can bring, they can use internally and they can look good and so on and so forth.
Right.
It's a lot of our job. A salesperson's job is to make your client look good. I mean, that's what it is. Now, so you can't go back and say that now I want to go back to the same school, I want to go back to the same college. So one is the power of your ideas. And what are the other ways to build relationships? Right? And one of them I think is an excellent model, which is the golf model. I started golf late in my life. I started golf when I was 40. So it was quite late. But I started to appreciate the value of the golf because it gives you 4 hours, 4.5 hours with somebody in a relatively relaxed setting, and where you can communicate and talk a lot.
Yeah.
And if you have good ideas, this is a great opportunity to actually showcase those ideas. Now, obviously, if you don't know how to play, it's a little difficult to take a client out for golf because so you have to learn some basic amount of golf. And I always believe it's not just a question of golf, right? And golf is just a way to think about it. It's a popular sport in America, and so on and so forth. But I also believe that you have to figure what are the multiple ways that you can intersect time with your clients. That's all it is. That's all it is. So if golf is one answer, golf is one answer. You said wining, dining. I don't drink alcohol, so it's difficult for me to do wining and dining and all of that stuff. I do take clients out for dinner many times. I have lunches many times. We've done all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, I never have those 5-hour lunches over alcohol or something like that, which somebody else will do. So you have to do. You have to do what comes naturally to you. You can't force your own system to do differently. And I'm quite a comfortable outdoors, quite a in general athletic kind of a guy. So I'm happy to play golf with my clients, and I will leave the wining and dining to somebody else who can do 10 shots of whiskey or tequila with somebody, and so on and so forth. It's a different type of relationship. I'm not knocking. I think it's a great way to build a relationship. I don't think you can have any meaningful conversation once you're 2 pegs down, but whichever way, it's a great way to build a relationship. You can build a good relationship. And once you've built a good relationship, then you can use that as a forum to exchange your ideas and so on and so forth. So I think what people should do is, the sales instinct has to be whatever comes to you naturally and build on that. So it's almost like you have to find your own inner strength and build on that inner strength and use those as the models to build time and relationship with your clients.
Excellent. One of the things I also wanted to know is, Phaneesh, to sell a dream to your team is one challenge. When I say your team sales, to sell a dream to your organization is another challenge. For example, you mentioned about Apple and Nordstrom, how they have been long-standing customers with $150 million, $400 million and everything. But when you started off, when you do a planning meeting at the end of the year, it's all about the numbers, and delivery wants to plan their resourcing, hiring and everything based on what you're projecting and all that. So when you build an organization at the scale of Infosys, how do you do the sales versus delivery mapping, and how do you handle all the conflicts and everything? How do you give them confidence, given that they are mostly offshore?
I think this happens with shared vision, shared goals, and lots of communication. Really a lot of communication. So the point is that you will make plans. But the more information you share with somebody far away, the more confidence they will continue to get. So, I always used to tell my sales guys, look guys, it's not reporting to anybody. It's not. But if you want to carry a team, you have to communicate more. So if I tell somebody, look, in Nordstrom, we are doing this kind of a discussion, we're having this discussion, we're having this. I say, okay. So that means I'll need skills like this and I will need skills like that. That's your problem. I'm focused on my problem, you focus on your problem. As far as I'm now concerned, we are up to date on all the conversations we are having. right? And the more conversations, so actually, and I know nowadays it's not a norm, but I can honestly tell you in those days, every evening I was on the phone with him. Not a single evening where I don't think I was on the phone with somebody or the other in India talking about what kind of conversations happened that day and so on and so forth.
Wow.
And I never looked at it as that I was reporting to anybody, because I was not. It was not like I was reporting in delivery or anything like that. But as long as you understand that for you to achieve your numbers, somebody else also has to do their part.
Right.
That's all it is. So your question is, how do you carry them? And I think that first you start with the shared vision. Okay, this is what we want to achieve here. We want to go to, let's say, this customer, and we want to get into 2 new services because we want to make ourselves sticky. So, our benchmark used to be that unless you're offering 3 services to a customer, you don't get sticky. So it may be an app dev, it may be an app maintenance, it may be an SAP, or it may be a something else, whatever, testing, whatever, I don't care. Right. I'm just saying fundamentally, we offer 3 services to the customer. So if we are offering 1 service, one of the goals, maybe 2 new services we have to offer. Even if we have to start smaller projects, it doesn't matter, we'll offer 2 more new services to the customer. Then you have the goals for the account, and everybody's aligned on the goals for the account. We're going to do $5 million with this customer, or $10, $20 million with this customer, or whatever it is, or 50 million. It doesn't matter what the number is. I say both parties' goals are clearly aligned. And it's not like my goals are this and your goals are this, because the moment you start doing that, then what happens is you start getting the friction.
Right.
And that friction is a killer. So you want to align the goals so that there's lubricant rather than friction. And then people start thinking and talking alike. And then lots of communication. So I think shared vision, aligning goals, and lots of communication. I would say those are the 3 ways to avoid. But having said that, there are always going to be conflict, because reality is that the customer wants something by December. You're trying to convince your delivery guys, hey guys, can we finish it by December? Delivery guys saying, no, we can only do it by March. You go back, negotiate a little with the customer, you negotiate a little. So there's a little bit of pull and stretch and all that, which is all fine, which is part of normal running of a business.
Right.
And, a zero conflict is also not a good thing, because at the end of the day, how do you stretch an organization? How do you create more excellence in an organization? Is by stretching, by pulling, doing things which you have never done before. All this is part of life, and that's how organizations evolve, and that's what we're talking about.
Okay. Thank you. If somebody were to start IT services today, because we still see that despite all so many companies, especially the ones that started in the 2000s, have done well, and people talking about IT services is saturated and everything, but we still see entrepreneurs starting off IT services and trying to make it as another Infosys, or at least to some extent, let's say 2,000, 5,000 member team and all that. So what would be your advice to them today? You believe that services is done, or you think there is an opportunity there? What is something so novel that they can do today?
No, I think, if you think about it very objectively, the global services market, or global technology IT market, is about $3 trillion. Nobody can ever convince me that it's done.
Okay.
Right? So there's always room. The question is, how do you take on that room? What are the unique plays that you can bring about? What are the differentiated plays that you can bring about? And how do you slot yourself in growth areas? Look at what fascinating companies like EPAM and all have done. Okay, over the course of 10 years, they have become the darling of Wall Street. The Indian companies, these guys made the Indian companies look passe. Okay, you guys are all old, traditional. By the way, no different than what we did. When I went in the 1990s to the US, I used to tell the IBMs, I used to tell the customers about IBM, EDS, CSC. I said, these are all old mainframe guys. Yeah, now technology has moved on. It's all client server. In those days, the technology was client server.
Right.
And then somebody else came and started trying to do that to us, saying, oh, no, these are all client server. We are the internet world technologies. We are the thin client, fat server kind of a model, very different. World has to be looking very different. And then luckily we were able to adopt to that, and so on and so forth. But the digital change which has happened has bred a whole bunch of new companies.
Yeah.
And those new companies have created tons of value. And in many cases, the companies have gone public and are doing very well. In many cases, they've got absorbed by other companies like the large Indian players or by others. And they continue to do well also within those companies. So to me, I think the question is, is it becoming more and more difficult to create multi-billion-dollar plays in IT? I think the answer is yes. Is there still an opportunity? I think the answer is yes. But is there an opportunity to create tons of value both for yourself, your customers, and your employees? The answer is very much yes. Because I am on the boards of a number of companies. I am advising a number of companies. And we have created very unique and very differentiated plays. And they have been acquired either by private equity companies or they have been acquired by large strategics.
Right.
For very good value for the differentiated play that they have. And that good value is shared between a lot of the employees. And because you're offering a very focused, differentiated offering, the customers also appreciate your depth of expertise and your relevance in that area. Because as a $50 million company, $100 million company, you're irrelevant in the market. I mean, when I say this with humility in the sense that, yes, there are thousands of companies like that. But if you're a $50 million company doing only one particular thing, only doing data migration to Snowflake or whatever it is, now you're extremely relevant because you're probably the largest company in that space. Right? So that's very, very different. And I think that's something that today's advice would be focus, 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 focus. And too often entrepreneurs think, oh, if I do this, then that's it. But actually, it has an opportunity cost. The moment you start doing what somebody else wants and you're thinking for cash flow reasons, I'll do it, etc., you've got to hold still. Even in Infosys, I remember when I first came to the US, everybody said, oh, you should just do body shopping to some other company, some other IT company. I said, but I don't need to come to the US to do that, yeah? There's no point. I mean, I can do that from anywhere. I don't mind spending another 3 months fighting in the marketplace, but not doing that. Direct customers, focus, direct customers, and, build. Because direct customers automatically give you repeat business.
Right.
If I had put bodies in IBM or CSC in those days, I would never have got the repeat. I would not be able to claim proudly that customers I started in 94, 95 are still large customers.
Still there, right.
So that's
great. As an extended question, you innovated with the outcome-based model and with ITOPS and things like that when you were with iGATE. What kind of innovations can happen for the future? Not that I'm trying to get some ideas here, but I'm just trying to know, given your experience.
I think the concept of customer wanting to pay more for results than for input effort has now become, I think, a mainstay, and particularly with the digital world, I think more and more people are doing that. And just think about you and me as individuals. Would you ever go to an auto mechanic and show your car to him and be comfortable when he or she turns around and says, I'll just charge you so many bucks an hour until I figure out what the problem is, then I'll charge you so many bucks. You'll say, boss, tell me how much it will be. Please tell me how much it will be. Right? You want to know how much you have to pay for a certain outcome, which is to get your car back on the road. Right? Customers are no different, but just because they are corporation budgets, they shouldn't act different. So I believe that the outcome-based model will become more and more popular. And just because it's more complex, does not mean it shouldn't be done. It is more complex. It is more complex in its understanding and so on and so forth. But that does not mean you take the lazy way out and say, okay, no, we'll just do time and periods and stuff like that. Right? Now that's one. The second thing I think is that under that broad concept of outcomes, I think a whole bunch of new areas and services will come. Earlier we used to do business processes and technology on outcomes model. Now it's AI, analytics, modeling under the outcomes model. So I think it's all very different. I think my sense is that all of these services that will emerge are what I would call fully integrated. Can I integrate analytics into my process and then offer an outcomes model? Can I integrate AI and do decision automation? etc., etc. So these all will lead to different outcomes, and I think that's what's going to happen. Is that the embedding? These are not discrete services. The idea is, can I integrate a whole bunch of services, AI in it, analytics in it, maybe infrastructure, cloud in it, maybe software in it, and business process in it, and stuff like that, and offer it to the client. I think that's what's going to happen.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Phaneesh. We have just a few minutes. You're close to 8:45. I know that I asked you for a 45-minute slot, but I'll take a couple of minutes if that's okay with you. Tell us about, I know that you are more in terms of mentoring entrepreneurs and given your experience coaching people and things like that. Tell us a little bit about Primentor and what you do there.
I think Primentor was built. The idea was that I have a soft spot for a lot of entrepreneurs who have spent a number of years in building out companies, but don't believe they have achieved the value that they would have desired.
Okay.
And so Primentor was built specifically to do that, to help companies in refining their positioning in the marketplace, creating the focus, and basically being a sounding board to the entrepreneur or to the founder, because that's what I have been. I've been always like a founder and entrepreneur, etc., etc. So the idea is, can I be the founder? Can I be the sounding board? Can I help them using my experience? And can I effectively build stronger teams? Can I create more unique positionings? Can I create more focus based on my knowledge of the market? And therefore put them on a different growth path and a different margin trajectory, which over 3 to 5 years makes that company significantly more valuable, where the founder can get a nice exit. So that's kind of what bulk of the work that I do nowadays. Yeah.
Okay. And coaching entrepreneurs is something, most entrepreneurs are today required, or they are looking for coaching. So I believe that's an area which Primentor also focuses in, right?
That's right, and I think the coaching happens through this, right? So you're helping them make better decisions in terms of what they should do, what they should not do, how to allocate resources to the right decisions, etc. So it's a more strategic kind of coaching in the sense that how do you become a better leader overall, and so on and so forth. Exactly.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about your social interests and in areas like wildlife conservation and things like that. How did that interest come?
I love wildlife. That's a passion for me. Seeing animals in the wild in their natural behavior is something that makes my heart go pitter-patter. Even my last trip we went, and we were fortunate enough to see a tiger in the wild, leopard in the wild, and so on and so forth. So I try and do as much as I can to support conservation of these animals in the wild. And whether it is through WWF or whether it is through small local foundations in India, which are trying to ensure that villagers don't encroach on the forest, so that the forest is left as it is, and so on and so forth. I think the idea is, what can we do to make sure the forests are preserved and that animals can live in the wild as much as possible?
Okay.
So anything to do with conservation efforts, I definitely am very, very soft on, and it's something which I just really, I want to be, want to be able to show my kids animals in the wild, and I don't know if they'll be able to show their kids animals in the wild because the way the forests are depleting and so on. So it's just a certain thing.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Phaneesh. That was very, very helpful. Once again, thank you for taking the time to do this, and it's a privilege and honor for me. Had I been with you in person, I would have touched your feet and taken your blessings, actually. But I'm remote, but seek your blessings, and I'm so happy and so honored to have had this conversation with you. Thank you for your time, Phaneesh.
Also, thank you very much, and I must commend you and congratulate you for trying to put something like this together, because effectively, these are all the kinds of knowledge sharing sessions which you can get from different. I'll provide one view. You will talk to 5 other entrepreneurs and founders. They will provide 5 different views, and it's up to each entrepreneur to figure out how to assimilate all of this and figure out what are the best practices and make it work for them. Thank you very much. Thanks, Vasu. All the best to you.
Take care. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye.